refugee camp, simply having a Palestinian flag and their makeshift home was a crime resulting in your arrest. Any representation of Palestine's existence was considered an act of deviance. Our voices have been silenced since the start of our colonization. With the recent events happening, I've been doing everything I can to share the events that are happening in Palestine right now. I've spoken out on the colonization of Sheikh Jarrah, land granted to Palestinians by the United Nations that is illegally occupied by Israel. I've spoken out on how Palestinians protesting the colonization of their homes have been shot at with rubberized metal bullets, stun grenades, and skunk water. I've spoken out about how Israel illegally controls Palestinians' access to their mosque Al-Aqsa. I've spoken out about how Palestinians were shot at while praying during Ramadan, while shopping for Eid holiday. I'm tired of having to speak out about the crimes my people face. Every post I share to raise awareness for what is happening physically hurts me. It hurts to see my people being ethnically cleansed and ignored. It hurts to know that the U.S. and Cornell are complicit in these crimes. We need change now. We live in the age of social media where events can be shared and spread immediately. With advances in technology, it's getting harder and harder for colonizers to control the narrative and hide the oppression of my people. My people don't have to suffer in silence anymore. We can stop the persecution, colonization, ethnic cleansing, and illegal occupation of Palestinians. This is why it's so important for everyone to do their part, to raise awareness for the Palestinian fight for freedom. Don't let my voice be drowned out by settler propaganda and false advertisement. Do your part. Talk about the illegal occupation of Palestine with your family and friends. Share information on what is happening to my people, my family. Be present when we demand justice for Palestinians. Thank you.
Is a standing rock situation for every Palestinian, every day and every night. I'm speaking to you as a Jewish woman with a very deep connection to Jewish religious practice, Jewish community, and Jewish history. From the beginning of Zionism, Jews spanning the entire spectrum of religious belief and observance, including the most from the beginning of Zionism, Jews spanning the entire spectrum of religious belief and observance, including the most religious Jews, have opposed Zionism and the state of Israel. But I grew up in a non-religious home, hearing that, quote, it was a land without people for a people without a land, and that we made the desert blue. Later, I knew that there were people there, and the truth was that for the state of Israel and its Zionist supporters and protagonists, those people were just not considered people. Their children were not considered children. Their fields, orchards, livestock, and homes existed only to be taken from them because their lives were in the way. In the way of what? Jewish Voice for Peace and the Committee for Justice in Palestine expanded my education on Israel and Zionism and brought me to activism for Palestine for over a dozen years. And one of the main reasons I joined PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, was because of its decades-long, solid, unequivocal, and ardent support for Palestinian freedom, with PSL founders and leaders having been in the forefront for decades of this movement, and for the way PSL integrates the movement for Palestinian freedom into the larger project of hope and struggle for a much more humane and just society here, there, and internationally. I want to begin to by honoring and exalting the fierce and courageous unity of the Palestinians that we and the world have witnessed and which continues. You know, we often talk of solidarity and unity without considering under what conditions unity must struggle to emerge, what it's up against. It is never easy. It's often there, but it cannot take form, as many labor, tenant, and community organizers know. In this case, the unity shown among Palestinians verges on miraculous. Not only were so many Palestinians in the Zionist settler colonial apartheid state of Israel driven off their land in 1948, or made colonized refugees on their own land for 73 years. Since 1967, Israel has geographically and administratively separated Palestinians from each other, and Palestinians are now ghettoized into 165 individual land-based islands, and they have several different kinds of identity cards, passes, and status. Palestinian resistance in East Jerusalem and Gaza and elsewhere throughout the land, and as we now see among refugees elsewhere, is truly a testament to the human capacity to struggle for freedom, justice, dignity, simply for a decent human life. We have seen these past few weeks how with only stones, handmade rockets, and their own bodies and voices, they have fought back against their oppressors' tear gas, rubber-coated steel bullets, and bombs. They confront a regime that possesses the most abundant and advanced military weapons, technology, and tactics, and an ideology relentlessly carried out through incremental genocide and ethnic cleansing. We recently saw, too, how easily Israel resorts to more cruder, pedestrian forms of violence in the form of racist mobs, pogroms. We saw Jews behaving like the Gestapo or like the Black Hundreds of Tsarist Russia. And there, too, with the complicity and assistance of the police, deliberately, disgustingly, and ruthlessly, both uniformed and non-uniformed Israelis joined forces to desecrate Al-Aqsa Mosque and prevent Palestinians from worshiping and partaking in the holy month of Ramadan. So may the unity and persistence of these Palestinians inspire and motivate us to do all that we can to struggle in unity with each other for a free Palestine, because it is here that we must build, along with the international community, a much more expansive, stronger, consistent, and tightly coordinated movement for freedom for the Palestinian people. And so I want to thank and commend the Cornell students, the Students for Justice in Palestine, the Arab Student Association, and Mecca Muslim Educational and Cultural Association for bringing us to this event through your resistance, your unity, and your persistent hard work. Of international and human rights possible. U.S. imperialism is rapacious, voracious, and insatiable. It exists through expanding domination, financially and militarily. It needs Israel to exist. And Israel, with its own weapons and surveillance technology industry, also needs the repressive regime about, as they always have done in U.S. history, through ongoing mass protests and campaigns that brought many different social justice movements together and spread throughout the country. Persistent showing up in the streets despite arrests and brutal repression, along with the embarrassing exposure here and internationally of U.S. racism, violence, and the vulnerability and contradictions of our capitalist system, we have people, ordinary people from all ages and backgrounds who brought about change. And of course, Donald Trump and COVID-19 swiftly lifted off the veil. Viral videos of the past few weeks have certainly made a difference in what people know about our, quote, special friend, unquote, Israel. The discourse regarding Israel has been changing over the past several years. Even corporate mainstream media is publishing pieces by people that would not have been published just a few years ago. BDS campaign has galvanized many people and introduced others to some awareness of the situation. But we remain up against 73 years of the most successful political PR campaign in human history. About that land without a people that I mentioned, has there ever been a catchier phrase? No one believes it, but it still works. People act as if it's true. We stand with Israel because of the Holocaust, and we care about Jews. Do we really? Some U.S. government officials and industrialists supported the Nazis during World War II, and the U.S. refused thousands of Jewish refugees from Europe during the war, and even rejected military intervention when and where it would have mattered. Then we hear we unconditionally support Israel because it's the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, now we know, because apartheid was announced officially in Israel last year. But things are changing. Although the official U.S. verbal defense of Israel's recent atrocities continues the past, it's no longer passionate and extensive, not even attempting to convince. It is brief, expressionless, robotic. It's reduced to just that one sentence repeated over and over until it's ringing meaninglessly now. The mantra, Israel has the right to defend itself. And even Biden saying that Israel did not overreact, that was also robotic, unconvincingly delivered. As we mobilize in huge numbers and regularly, and not wait for the next catastrophic Israeli action or even the next Nakba day, we must go where our presence will make a difference, and I'm always thinking of that damn Technion. And we have to, yeah. And we've got to counter that false and normalizing narrative, but we must do it consistently, creatively, and persistently. We must find the most effective language and activities that reach people. We can fill in the enormous tragic gaps in coverage by the New York Times
days ago, Ramadan, the holy month for Muslims, just ended. Palestinians have not been able to celebrate Ramadan, an entire month, to practice their religion and strengthen their worship in peace. Every day of this holy month is a struggle. Every day is lived in fear, and every day is lived like it is the last. I saw a post on Instagram once of a woman whose mother called him one day from Gaza. When he picked up the phone, he noticed she was talking like it was her last day. The woman called her son to say her goodbye, yearning to hear his voice just one last time, just in case something were to happen to her. Imagine a life where you constantly live in fear on the soil of your homeland. Imagine not knowing when you will wake up in the only place you've ever called home. Imagine not knowing if you will ever see your son again. Iman Besher tweeted one night, "Tonight I put the kids to sleep in our bedroom so that when we die together, and no one would live to mourn the loss of one another." A Palestinian doctor was treating patients who got injured during bombings and attacks. He got a ton of bleeding civilians that are in bad conditions, and after a short amount of time, he came to realize that 2 of the injured people were his own children. As Eid al-Fitr arrived, Palestinians were encouraged and forced to find the slightest amount of joy in their holiday. Some celebrated without the presence of family members, and others celebrated with the thought of, "Is my family back home safe?" constantly crossing their minds. Their joy is their only form of resistance. Many people will say, "I don't want to choose sides or get involved in politics. This fight isn't about choosing sides. This is a fight for humanity." Siding with Palestine is siding with humanity, just like siding with the Black Lives Matter movement is siding with humanity. This is not a political issue. It's simply just not. It is a humanitarian Israeli apartheid to ethnically cleanse Palestine. When you choose to finally see what's going on and recognize the everyday ethnic cleansing of Palestine, you will then start to normalize the death of innocent Palestinians. Stop saying both sides are wrong or this is happening on both sides, because there are no both sides to genocide and ethnic cleansing. Israel is an apartheid state using its massive military force against Palestinian people. The U.S. funds Israel's military. Every year, $3,800,000,000 of our taxes are being used and shifted to the Israel military. Instead of using it for things to benefit ourselves, it's being used to support ethnic cleansing. As of yesterday, 119 people were killed, 31 children, 19 women, and more than 830 people are wounded. We are witnessing a genocide. Today commemorates the 72 years of the dispossession of Palestinian refugees and ethnic cleansing and theft of land. More than 500 villages were ethnically cleansed, but this didn't end back in 1948. As of today, Palestinians are still being thrown out of their homes, waiting for their right of return. Every voice is a voice that matters. The voice of each and every one of you is the beginning of a ripple effect that will lead others to the truth of what is really happening. Do not underestimate your impact. Many people are silent. Why? Because genocide hasn't come knocking down their doors. Empathy is the medicine this world needs. Continue to educate yourself and use your voice, because what is happening is an everyday struggle. If it was their land, they wouldn't want to see it burn.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes!
My name is Yahya, and I have a few things that I want to share with you today. I come here in front of you all as someone who's both Muslim and black. And though many may like to deny it, it's not hard as a black person in this country to see the parallels between the subjugation, the dehumanization, and the oppression of the Palestinian people, and the dehumanization and brutalization of black bodies here in the States. know about settler colonialism here. Let's not forget that we're all standing on stolen land. This parallel, it was our leaders who saw it. It was Angela Davis who said the struggle of the Palestinian people is intertwined with struggles against racism all around the world. As Haj Malik, Malcolm X, back in the 60s was calling out this injustice. And I feel like we should remember what he said about the media that we see on our TV screens. We shouldn't let people try to fool us into thinking that the occupation is some unique kind of conflict, disconnected from other systems of oppression. I know black folks can recognize oppression when they see it, and you see it in occupied Palestine. I know my Muslim brothers and sisters who grew up here post 9/11 to recognize discrimination in the way that media weaves narratives and demonizes us, and you see that in occupied Palestine. So remember what Malcolm said. If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppression. I know I see a lot of familiar faces here, and some new ones too, and I don't know how many of you were around 2 years ago when a very dedicated group of organizers, some from SJP, some from Mecca, but many from a coalition of groups representing the disenfranchised and marginalized groups on Cornell's campus came together and unified, trying to pass a bill giving the university to divest from companies propping up the occupation. And I bring this up not to remind you of a time where we struggled or where we were defeated. I want to remind you not to let anyone convince you that because we're here in Ithaca, that we're too far removed from the occupation, that we just don't understand, that our actions here on this campus in the city don't have a real impact. What we do here, what we fight for here, the solidarity that we show here matters to our Palestinian family here on this campus and around the world. Tides like this often turn slowly, but they turn nonetheless. So we're freeing Palestine and Palestine is free from the river to the sea. And lastly, I was asked to recite a dua, a short prayer for Muslims in Palestine. So I'll do that in Arabic first and then in English. اللهم أصلح أحوال المسلمين في فلسطين. اللهم أصلح أحوال المسلمين في فلسطين وفي كل مكان يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. O Allah, rectify the affairs of the Muslims in Palestine. O Allah, rectify the affairs of the Muslims in Palestine in every place. O Lord of Majesty and God. Thank you.